Very good.
Well, good morning, everyone, and I'm just delighted to have my friend MJ Pangman on our call today, and she's become an expert, a real authority on some of the really amazing things about water. And maybe to just kick this off, so often when we first get into science, I think our first molecular formula that we know, even when you're in elementary school, is H2O, and then a little longer, you realize, well, what does that mean? H2O, well, two hydrogen and one oxygen. And then you see a picture and it's kind of like a Mickey Mouse head. And how could it be any more simple than that? But as we get into it, it's a lot more. In fact, let me see if I can find something. This is pretty interesting right here. The water actually has structure. And if you count hexagonal, have you ever seen a snowflake that wasn't based on sixes? It's always that way. There's something about water, and we're going to talk about that amazing structure and some of the other properties with MJ. She's amazing. In fact, this is just poetic. Dancing with Water, dancingwithwater.com to learn more about that. A worthwhile book. It really makes you think. Pardon me?
Dave, didn't you get your copy of the second edition of the book?
I'm anxiously awaiting it, but it came snail mail. But I'm waiting. Maybe today I'll get it after our call. I'm sure it's even better.
Okay, there is an addition to the book.
Okay. Anyway, MJ is quite the authority on water. Just some things I'd never heard of before until reading the book, and we've got something that's really special that we share with people, and almost everyone knows that water loves everything. It's the universal solvent, and in fact, it grabs bad stuff as well. And so when we pull water out of our faucet, there might be some bad stuff, and so having a filter to get the bad stuff out is just common sense. But there's a lot of goodness that you can add to the water as well, and that's going to be the emphasis of what we're going to be talking about today. So I'm just going to turn it over to you, MJ, and I think you got some stuff to share, and I'll just give it to you. But thanks for doing this for us.
You're welcome. This is a fun group to talk to because they've already got some fun background, and magnetics have an impact on water, and we can talk about that a little bit. So what I want to do first, Dave, is I have a little bit of a PowerPoint that goes into the basics of the structure of water. And so I'm going to just share my screen here for a minute. We'll just use a few slides from the opening part of this, but that's okay. All right, so let's talk about the structure and energetics of water. First of all, the word structure implies something solid, and water is not solid unless it's frozen. So water is fluid and dynamic, a lot of people are saying. And in fact, originally when I started to write about the structure of water, this is the biggest flack I got from the scientific community was water is a fluid. It cannot have structure because it's so dynamic. And quite frankly, that's true of most water. But the molecular structure of water is such that water molecules are always exchanging partners. And that'll become apparent here in a minute when we start introducing some other terms. However, so there are some circumstances where a lattice-like order develops in water at the molecular level. So when water moves, the molecules tend to maintain their orientation and they move together as sort of like a school of fish. And this is what we mean when we talk about water having structure. So order or structure is possible because of the charges present with each molecule. You showed that diagram at the opening of this, Dave, and this is how that kind of organization can play. Hydrogen atoms have a slightly positive charge to them, and oxygen atoms have a slightly negative charge. So when they are present in a water molecule, which is two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom, you've got charges that are exposed, and water molecules are attracted to these to each other based on those charges. They form an electrostatic bond called a hydrogen bond. So you can see this positive charge on the, this water molecule on the left is attracted to another water molecule, the one here on the right, and they form this bond, which is not a tight bond. It's not like the bond between the hydrogen and the oxygen atoms, but it's a weaker bond. And so water molecules are always exchanging partners, even when they become structured. But there are certain circumstances that help water molecules so that when they change partners, they come back into the same organization. And that's one of nature's miracles. So water's hydrogen bonding is mostly random in the water on the surface of the earth at this point in time, much like what you see in this diagram on the left. So you can see that these water molecules, the larger dots are the oxygen and the smaller dots are the hydrogen atoms, but they've got themselves attracted via hydrogen bonding to other water molecules. So you can get all kinds of random order, if you will, randomness in the way that the hydrogen bonding forms. But this diagram here on the right shows what happens when water molecules become organized or assume this structure. I've got two other pictures here that, this is a diagram from the book. On the left, you'll see a picture of some amorphous quartz. You find quartz all over. It's the most common mineral on the earth. When the water molecule, when quartz's molecules are organized, it forms a quartz crystal. And you know that quartz crystals are more clear, they have different properties, and it's because of the organization. So this would be similar to a piece of quartz on the left, and the illustration on the right would be similar to the way quartz is organized when it is in the form of a quartz crystal. Well, it turns out that quartz at a molecular level has a very similar organization to water. And that's why quartz interacts so interestingly with water, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But, so, when water is structured, hydrogen bonding is more organized, like this pattern on the right. And what results is similar to the difference between amorphous quartz and a quartz crystal. All right, so as water becomes structured, it combines in these hexagonal subunits, and they stack in honeycomb-like sheets that are slightly offset so that successive sheets can shift to accommodate irregularities around water molecules. And this is how water holds minerals. So each of these sheets can move. They're offset slightly. And that's how water can hold minerals. But without minerals, when water assumes this ordered structure, this is from Dr. Pollock's work at the University of Washington. And these are his diagrams, which we have permission to use in the book. So you can see this is not, when I first started to write about water, all of this was poo-pooed. But now it's beginning to be proven and shown as we get better methods to really look at water at a molecular level. And we still really can't, we don't have a way to visually look at this, but this is through computer simulation and through all of the dynamics that we now understand about water. So here's the deal. Order changes water's properties so that it behaves more like a crystal. And to be clear, water already behaves like a crystal, but when you improve the order, the crystalline behavior gets amplified. And that's what's significant about creating and drinking structured water. So like solid crystals, liquid crystals, water in its structured form becomes a liquid crystal. And they provide an efficient mechanism for storing, transferring, and amplifying energy. And that's the significance here, because you and I are liquid crystals. So that's the importance of order. And I'm going to introduce, I wasn't going to look at this slide, but I'm going to introduce this lovely book by a woman by the name of May Wan Ho. She wrote a book called The Rainbow and the Worm, and it's not an easy book to read, but it details some of her work as she discovered that we are liquid crystals, that life on this planet is liquid crystalline, and that order that happens with life is almost more important than the substances that have to be brought together for life to appear, for life to happen. And so here, this second paragraph on this slide says, when something dies, its crystalline order begins to deteriorate very rapidly. And so it is the order or the organization that provides the pathway for signals and information. And that's what life is all about. Without the order, there isn't any life. So one more slide here. Our traditional sciences have taught us that water is just the medium in which everything else is held. And we get told all the time, we're water beings, we have to drink water. But now we're going to another level of this whole idea about how important water is, because we're discovering that water is the key to how everything works. Structured water is more efficient water. So this is the importance of having structured water. It's responsible for the rapid transmission of signals and other information throughout the body. Structured water is important for folding proteins. Your proteins will not work unless they are folded in very specific ways, and they fold around structured water. Structured water is critical for the stability of our DNA. We found that out when the original computer models of DNA began to be constructed. And when they created these molecular simulations, computer simulations, the DNA would always fly apart until they incorporated water in the equation. And they discovered that it was water, and that it was structured water that holds our DNA together and stabilizes it. So we know now that that it's structured water that surrounds healthy DNA, and as we look at DNA of cancer or other diseases, we can see that the structure of the water around that DNA has deteriorated. So we want to keep structured water in this body. And last on this list is structured water connects other crystalline components of the body. So we introduced that whole concept. We are liquid crystals, and the components of our body are liquid crystalline. And it's water that connects all of those liquid crystalline components. And when that water is kept structured, we are able to transmit signals more rapidly. You've got more efficient communication. Water's amplifying those signals if it's in a structured state better than otherwise. So structured water is important. All right, so now I will stop sharing that screen, and we will get into some of the components of your waterfall. Dave, did you want to share a story right off the bat? Because you told me a very interesting story about a younger fellow who started drinking water from your waterfall, and what happened to him.
Well, recently, there's a really neat lady, Nyla Orr, and her grandson, he's 8 years old. He's just really, really messed up really bad. They want to take his colon out, kidney problems, very serious situations going on. And just real briefly, doing nothing else, but just introducing the waterfall, things just start working way, way better. Just really dramatic. But the neatest thing is if you're a grandma, just imagine your grandson coming up and saying, "Oh, thank you. I love your waterfall. Thank you for getting me the waterfall. The water's so good." And it's transformative. You know, this is really different than just getting a glass of water. As soon as you taste it, you think, "Oh, wow." We kind of joke about that all of us become water snobs once we start drinking this stuff because it's just delicious and it's better for you. And since it feels good, your body craves it. And so you're drinking more of something that's good for you and something so foundational. So it's just bound to do good. And also another thing that is really a breakthrough, and you talk about that quite a bit too, is that water naturally is a lot to do with salt. And in an essential way, every cell technically is just kind of a sack of ocean water with all, not just the sodium chloride, but the other salts and everything. And that not all salt is equal. We've got several talks. Phil Offerly comes to mind where he just eloquently talks about unrefined real salt that is combined with real living water. Magical things can happen. But boy, there's so many good things about just optimizing your water and everything else. But boy, that can't, other than breathing air, drinking water is probably the next vital thing. And so, wow. Go ahead, MJ.
All right, awesome. This is the kind of thing we hear a lot when people start to drink structured water, is that if nothing else, they have a better sense of well-being. And everything depends on your health, and everybody's response to anything is different. So we are all unique and we're all in a different place. But depending on your health circumstances, your age, and the requirements of your body, just introducing this form of water can make a big difference for a lot of people. And they'll say, "Oh, I've got more energy. I feel better about life. I feel like stress doesn't hit me as hard." And of course, if your body is functioning more efficiently, you're going to be better off all the way around. A number of years ago, there was, I think it was the University of Michigan, created a new food pyramid. You've seen the traditional food pyramid, which is really not the greatest representation of what's the most important, but you know, they've got the grains at the bottom and some vegetables and fruits and whatever. Anyway, the University of Michigan created a new food pyramid, and guess what was at the bottom as the foundation? Water. And that's really much more accurate. So water's the foundation. When you get a good foundation, everything else can build much more appropriately. And your body, when it's given the right things, your group knows when your body has what it needs, it will do what it needs to do. So, you know, the waterfall is a very nice water filter, but it does more than filter water. And I guess that's, you know, that's one of the big high points of what you can do with the waterfall. So I thought I would maybe just speak to some of the components that are in your waterfall and why it's doing more than filter water. Okay, so first of all, I'm the co-author of this book, Dancing with Water. So I'll say we like gravity water systems. Okay, and the waterfall is a gravity water system. We have so much technology now that's associated with water. It's almost overboard. We're zapping water and whacking water and spinning water and all of these things. And some of them are natural and some of them are not. But a gravity water system emulates the way nature filters water. And nature does that slowly, naturally and uses her forces. So you put water in the top, it percolates down just like water percolates down through the mineral layers of the earth. And in so doing, the qualities of water are changed. So typically, if we've got rainwater, it's been cleared, it's often quite distilled, the water begins to pick up nutrients as soon as it leaves a cloud. Coming down through the atmosphere, it's picking up gases, it's picking up other things in the atmosphere, but it hits the soil and begins to percolate through rock layers. And as it does so, it picks up minerals. Water was meant to hold minerals. This is the whole salt idea that you're talking about. Minerals in the form of salts are perfect because salts are ions and they have charges to them. And I know that your group understands the whole concept, especially of using magnets with ions. So ions are charged particles, they're active, okay? They can interact with other particles because of the charges on them. So water's picking up minerals, it's picking up energy, and as water moves and interacts with the magnetics of the earth, earth is a big magnet, and as ions move within a magnetic field, they spin. So you're activating the water as it's percolating down through the minerals. So here you have the waterfall. You're going to take the water down through layers of carbon first. You've got an activated carbon filter there. Purifying the water. It's got silver components in it. I like that too because silver is one of those metals that they call oligodynamic. It has antibacterial qualities. That's why people take colloidal silver. So you've got the addition of the silver in your activated charcoal filter. Charcoal absorbs and it grabs all of those contaminants. There are lots of carbon components within the earth. They're doing the same kind of thing. So you're emulating nature in this wonderful gravity system and allowing the water to very slowly percolate down through these different layers. The next beauty about the waterfall, the way I see it, is that Nikken has chosen to use the pi system as their way of structuring water. Now, our book, Dancing with Water, is all about nature's ways of structuring water, because there are tons of things that water does to bring and to maintain structure in its water. And so the Nikken system is using the pi system, which is based on some research that is actually quite old, and mostly the awareness is in the Asian countries of the whole pi system. So some researchers in the 1960s discovered that if you add the tiniest amount of iron in its ferrous form, the tiniest amount, you can energize water so that it supports the growth of plants. And it turned out, as they did more research, that not only does it support the growth of plants, but it supports the growth of all organisms, because this participates in the creation of a form of structure in the water based on the addition of those minerals and how they're interacting. But the other thing that the Nikken system is doing is there's a toroidal magnet in the spigot. Now, that's one of the most common ways of structuring water, is to send water, moving water through a magnetic field. And what happens when you do that is that all of the ions, if you've got minerals in the water, all of those ions are lining up against the magnetic field. Water is what they call a diamagnetic substance. It's not magnetic, it's actually the opposite of magnetic. So water repels a magnet. And in that process of being repelled by the magnet, the water is actually forced to align against the magnetic field. So remember the water, because of the hydrogen and the oxygen and the picture we showed early on, has got a positive and negative side to it. So that aligns against the magnetic field, and you've got these water molecules that if they're spinning, going through a magnetic field, they have to align and realign, align and realign, align and realign. And that process forces something to develop that is referred to as coherence. Coherence simply means that these individual water molecules attain the ability to work as one. You're a coherent being, you and I. We have lots of independent parts of us. Each cell is an independent unit, but they're cooperative in how they work together as they come together as one unit, as one being. Either an organ or a tissue or whatever, they're acting as one. So water develops this coherence as it aligns and realigns within a magnetic field. I can say that in an electric field, something similar is happening, but it's not what happens within a magnetic field. So many dynamics happen in a magnetic field, and your group knows this better than most people, that interaction of life forms within, with a magnetic field. Some very beautiful things happen. So with water, you're getting one of those that's happening, and the water becomes structured. So you've got that magnetic spigot there, and the water ends up coming out of that and going through that magnetic field. But, and this is what I was telling you this morning, Dave, more than that is happening, because once that water gets into the holding tank, those water molecules are still moving. They're moving in a coherent school of fish-like fashion, but they're exposed to that magnetic field for the duration of the time that they're in that holding tank. Water responds to some very small magnetic fields. So even before it passes through that spigot, that water's sitting in a magnetic field. And as it moves past and through that field, it's constantly, very slowly and beautifully, the way nature does these kinds of things, creating and refining the structure of the water as it sits in that holding tank. So you've filtered the water, you've got nice clean water. Now you've got water sitting in this holding tank and being exposed to a magnetic field. And like I was explaining to you this morning, the longer it sits, the more refined that structure becomes. So it's a very beautiful thing. I was suggesting to you, and I'll suggest it to your group, that ideally you want to fill up that filter at night so that it sits longer before you start to take the water out of the system to drink it. And something else that we discovered, years ago we were doing some testing for a group that had a little machine that created structured water by vortexing it within a magnetic field. So like I said, this is a very common way of creating structured water. And the experiment was set up such that we were going to create the water, but we wanted to show that the water would hold its structure for a period of time. Because there are some things like ionizing water that will structure the water, but it doesn't hold because they're using electricity. So we had them make the water one day. It was supposed to sit overnight, and they were going to give it to several individuals the next day and test these individuals before and after drinking the water. So it wasn't part of the experiment originally, but the fellow who was creating the water and running the experiment decided that he would test the water before and after it had sat. And that wasn't really necessarily part of the test. We were testing the individual and for the individual's response. But this was GDV testing. It's a way of looking at the energy of the water itself. And he, at the end of the experiment, he texted me and he said, "This will be interesting and I can't explain it." He said, "But I tested the water before and after it had sat overnight. And after it sat overnight, it had more energy than when we first created it." And that's when we looked at, and I believe that at this point in time, we're the only ones who have really talked about this. And this is mentioned, we have a whole section on it, Dave, in the second edition of Dancing with Water. That's when we realized there was this component of stillness that's really important for refining and maturing water's structure. Victor Schauberger was one of the original people. If you dig into water very deeply, you'll come across his name. He was an Austrian forester. They called him the water wizard because he did so many amazing things with water. But he talked about water's refinement, and he always talked about it sitting in a nice oval shape in darkness and in stillness. So we started to put the pieces together and we realized that, yeah, there's this component of movement that's important. The water percolating down through the waterfall, that's important. Water needs to move in order to get those ions and, you know, create the magnetic fields. Water responds to spinning and vortices and all of that. But there's a time to be still and there's a time to be active. We sleep, we wake. Light and dark, it's part of the whole balance of life and the cycles of life. So water responds to stillness too. So now you have the water sitting in that holding tank, and the stillness is really a part of the refining process. So if you all will fill up those filters in the you know, before you go to bed, and let them sit in the darkness. That's another thing. I know your PI system and the PI ceramics that are used, the bioceramics, also have infrared frequencies to them. And infrared frequencies are another one of these things that produce structure for water. There are lots of different light frequencies, and the infrared band is the most potent for contributing to water's structure, and that's available in darkness. Think of night vision cameras. They're looking for infrared, and that's what you see on the screen. So infrared is available at night, in the darkness, and the stillness, and that's part of the process, and that's part of the beauty of what you have going on there. The other thing I picked up in looking at the design of this is that you've got this myophon stone in the bottom. That is a stone from the ocean. They have to dig down deep to get that, so it's an ancient. Of course, anything that's rock is ancient. No pollutants in that. It's got a whole plethora of minerals. So you're getting a nice balance of minerals, and it very slightly balances the minerals in the water, releases them in an oxide form, so you're getting the oxygen. And what else was I going to say about the myophon stone? It's called medicine stone in the Asian countries, because they've used it for centuries to treat their water, because it does some very beautiful things. So the addition of minerals also helps water to hold its structure, because minerals add energy, they energize the water. And you saw that diagram in the beginning of the PowerPoint where you could see that, you know, water is a laminar substance, and it has these sheets of hexagonal subunits, and they're offset so that they can incorporate the salts. And actually the salts, when you put them in the water, they contribute to an even more complex crystalline structure that's a whole nother subject that I won't get into. But there are layers of structured water that form around each ionic particle, and salts are charged ions. So that contributes to the development of an even more complex liquid crystal that will hold more energy and provide the human body with this whole balance of salts, like from the ocean. So, I don't know if your group has any questions.
No, we could maybe do that, but I'm just kind of thinking my routine at night, I get into the ice cube tray and get a big handful, put it in the hopper, fill it up. And it's just, when I wake up, it's kind of cool. And I've got my Himalayan salt shaker, give it a couple of twists, go like that, and get a drink of, it just, it makes your body wag its tail. It just, it's what a wonderful thing is just have a tall glass of that first thing in the morning. And it's amazing. And that unrefined salt, there is something magic about that, putting that together. One of the things I'd like to just ask, since I was introduced to you, hearing things, and I love our unit because it's something that's affordable for pennies a gallon. Anybody has access to the best water there is. But I think, well, how can I make it better? What can I do to maybe just make it a little more optimum? And so kind of with some of your ideas, and it looks really cool too, is I love all of those rocks in there, kind of looking at it. And I thought, ooh, that'll look really cool with maybe a couple of quartz crystals, maybe some shungite. And any thoughts? What would you do, MJ?
That's really nice. I have a gravity water filter myself, and I have all kinds of stones in that holding tank, because stones have their own energetic fingerprint, and anybody who's studied rocks and stones will know that, there are whole books out there that will tell you the effects of different stones when placed in water, or even when held on the human body. Each mineral has its own set of frequencies and its own, quite well known now, effect on the emotional, spiritual, and physical components of the human body. So people use stones for healing, and they make gemstone elixirs. It's sort of like homeopathics, because you're just adding this gentle energy to the water. So you can put stones in the bottom of that, besides the Mayan stone that come with the waterfall. And that's, we have a whole section of Dancing with Water that talks about adding information to water. So, water can be a huge tool for healing, not only just to drink the water because we need to be hydrated, but because it's a wonderful delivery system for information. And that's where the whole world of homeopathy and Bach flower remedies come from. Water holds and carries information, especially when it's structured. It's ready to hold information. So if you put some specific stones, and we said in the beginning that quartz crystal has the same molecular structure as water. And so people for centuries have put quartz crystals in their water. It helps water hold its structure. So that's a great idea, Dave, to put the crystals in. And then, if you have a background in mineralogy and you understand some of the benefits and the energetic fingerprints that can be passed along from some of these other stones, by all means. There are some stones that you shouldn't put in water, so do your research there. But a vast variety of stones and crystals can be placed in the water and changed periodically based on what you need, because your body's energy changes, your family's energy changes. People like to put rose quartz in the bottom of their tank, because rose quartz is a very emotionally stabilizing stone. wonderful for children to drink, very balancing, and like I said, very emotionally stabilizing. You know, the people who get into some of the aspects, the spiritual aspects of what these stones do, that's a whole nother subject, but a lovely one to get into. And you mentioned shungite. Shungite is a Russian stone that carries codes for balance and harmony for the earth. And it also brings an interesting, new, more complex buckyball-like structure to the water via epitaxy. Epitaxy is a term they use in material science, and it just refers to the fact that water will mimic at a molecular level the template of whatever you put in it. So that's why putting a quartz crystal in water helps the water hold its structure, because the water's mimicking that molecular arrangement. Well, shungite has a buckyball type structure, and that's another whole subject that you can get into. We've got articles on that on dancingwithwater.com, which is our website. But yeah, shungite is a wonderful thing to put in the water. And before I forget, Dave, I'm going to suggest that that you put the salts in the water in a liquid form, and they will even taste smoother and better. In fact, if you were to take some water out of the waterfall and put it on a pitcher on the counter overnight, and put water that you've made ever heard the term Soleil? Mm-hmm. If you'll make a little Soleil out of that salt, it's basically a saturated salt solution, and put several drops of that in the pitcher, up to maybe a dropper full, depending on where your water is and how much salt you like to add. I think that if you let that sit overnight, you will find the taste of the water even smoother, because then the water, if you've got the salts in solution, they've already created a structured water. The ocean is very structured. Even though it's dynamic and moving all the time, it's very structured because of the salts in the water and because they're all incorporated into the structure of the water. So if you'll make that Soleil first and then put it into the water and let it sit overnight, I think you'll notice a difference in the smoothness and the taste of the water, because those minerals will have an easier time being incorporated into the structure of the water before you drink it. And the minerals will be more available to your body.
Or you could take the Soleil a little bit like that and then drink the water if you don't want to drink salted water.
But salt's really smoothen the taste of water.
Okay.
You're already adding some minerals with the pie system because of the pie ceramics, the bioceramics, and because of the myafin stone. You're already adding some minerals. But I think that if you do this trick that you're already familiar with, I think you'll find another level of taste quality improvement.
Yeah.
Play with it. I mean, it's a dance, right?
Yeah, it is. Just one person has a question, and just kind of my personal thing, especially in the summer. I'm not an ice water drinker so much as just getting a little bit cooler than room temperature. But have you got any thoughts on drinking the water temperature, room temperature water versus cold water, health-wise or anything? Does that affect health? Does it affect structure? I know really hot water, that can mess up the structure, but maybe talk a little bit about that.
Good question. The ideal temperature for water to hold its perfect structure is 40 degrees Fahrenheit, okay. 4 degrees centigrade. That's all over the place. That's they call it the anomaly point of water, because that's the ideal temperature for helping to hold water structure. But not everybody likes cold water. I don't really like cold water, especially not in the winter. So
one of the things that kind of got me excited about cold water is so much of our calorie expenditure every day is just maintaining our core temperature. And so if you drink ice water, your body has to heat that up and uses energy. And so it could actually be a weight loss program. an adjunct to that. But that's kind of a little thought right there. Someone asked if I would hold this up again, and so here is water at its finest, that neat structure. Each one of those is a water molecule, and so there's 6 of them that make this toroid or this hexagonal structure. And if you kind of look at that, when I see that, I kind of think snowflake, and that's what every snowflake kind of begins in, is like this right here. So that's kind of an interesting thought. Hey, just one other thing. I think since we're showing pictures, if you get on the computer and search Dr. Emoto, notice all of these have hexagonal structures, but this is just a whole different thing that we could talk about a whole lot. That as far as water holds information, as an example, a lot of naturopaths make their own homeopathic stuff, and they actually will have a waterfall in their office to drink the water, of course, but also to create their formulas. And so that's kind of a neat idea, using that with good effectiveness. And so anyway, let's see. Let's see, give us your number or email. What is your email in your website and your contact information if we go to dancingwithwater.com?
You can catch me at mj@dancingwithwater.com.
Okay, so that's real easy. So dancingwithwater.com is your website, and then just go MJ at. Okay, excellent. Wow, any final thoughts that you'd like to offer?
I don't think so, unless anybody has any other questions.
All right, well, I really appreciate you doing this for us, and let's take advantage of this with our own families, but also just think of everybody out there. We all need water, and why not just get the very best? And interestingly, pretty much the most inexpensive, other than if you're just going to drink tap water. But if you're really concerned about health, we really have the best value having the Waterfall. It does so much. And maybe think of adding a quartz crystal and a couple of other things. If the rock is really, really pretty, be advised that maybe it's because it has heavy metals or something. And so I'm glad you brought that up, because water is hungry, and it leaches out everything, good or bad. So we, be informed in what you put in there. Don't just say, "Ooh, that's a pretty rock, I'm going to throw that in there." So.
Right, and this is a good chance to say one of the reasons we like the gravity filtration systems is because a lot of people are going towards reverse osmosis water these days.
Dead water.
That is a bad idea. And I won't go down that road right now, but that is a bad idea, okay? So filtration, if you can get good filtration systems, far, far, far better than the horrible experience of sending water through a reverse osmosis membrane. That's terrible. That's hard to, water has a hard time recovering from that, and an extremely hard time then absorbing minerals afterwards. So stay away from RO water. You got a good thing going with the Waterfall there. Thank you, Elaine, for your comment. And
I guess if you have one and you just got the nastiest water and you got it RO and you're invested in it, you still need a Waterfall, and so you can help bring it back to life if you have the Waterfall afterwards. But
Dave, we did create a code for your people.
Oh yes,
that's it in the book. So they're 10% off, and that code is 10, the number 10, 10, and the words OFF now. So T10 OFF now is a code on dancingwithwater.com if you want to buy the book or have a look around at anything else. The website is an educational website, so we have articles on lots of different things, and we showcase a number of different things. So if your group is interested in more, there they can find it.
MJ, thank you so much, and everyone have a wonderful rest of the day and weekend. And wow, I think I'm gonna go get another glass of water. Thanks, everyone. Take care.